What if I tell you that the school shooting that took place on May 24th, 2022 at Robb Elementary School in Texas had a fundamental basis in accordance with behavior? That's right, behavior as the backdrop as to why such a tragedy occurred. Hello, how you doing? My name is Dr. Marla Crawford. I am a quality mental health professional for adults and children. I currently hold a master's in psychology and applied behavior analysis and a PhD in special education leadership. And this qualifies me to talk about this mass shooting that occurred at Robb Elementary School and tie it and connect it to behavior. What do I mean that it's connected to behavior? There are four means or functions for behavior that we know in the field of psychology and applied behavior analysis. Behavior serves a function to avoid incidents, to escape events that are unwanted, to seek attention, or to gain access to something tangible. Now, let's look at the shooter, the young man, and what could be the function of the behavior that he demonstrated. Now, we don't have all the information on the mass shooter. However, the media has come out and said that he was lonely. How do you know he was lonely? Can he really say he was lonely? Well, I don't think I can. So I can address it from a technical standpoint of he may have been functioning in isolation, meaning that he could have been withdrawn from his peers. He could have had distant relationships with adults and others in the community. He could have been a young man that was in need of support and services. And I'm sure that is a fact that he needed support and services. And from a professional standpoint, I feel that the adults in the community, in the schools, in society failed him. And when I say they failed him, it's because he just didn't wake up and say, I'm just going to go and shoot up a school. Let's think about the behavior of the young man. He killed his grandmother. Most children adore their grandparents. Their grandparents are the apple of their life for many children because grandparents tend to spoil them, love them, hug them, and they tend to go home. But in this case, this young man was with his grandmother. And the one thing that concerns me is that he was in that state of doing that and what could have prompted that behavior. Now, before I begin breaking the perspectives down about the behavior that concerns the young man, let me let you know something about mass shootings. If you look at the history behind mass shootings, whether these shootings have been in schools, malls, movie theaters, in the park, at the games, it can be almost anywhere. Every time we have a mass shooting that occurs, within 10 to 13, no more than 15 days, there is a second mass shooting. Think about when you look at the Columbine, look at Parksdale, look at Buffalo, look at what happened years ago in Texas when we had the military gentleman that did a mass shooting. All of these shootings occur within so many days of a prior mass shooting, or there was a mass shooting that occurred so many days afterwards. And that's a fact, because the one thing we need to understand about mass shootings, when we present them to the public, yes, the public needs to know about the mass shooting, but we also need to understand that they prompt what you call copycats. And that means people will also emulate the same behavior because it becomes a trigger mechanism when others have similar mental health or behavior challenges going on within themselves, where they have some internal needs that need to be addressed or that haven't been addressed. So I want you to understand, and that's one of the reasons why you find out in other countries outside of the United States, even though these types of shootings do occur, they may mention it, but they don't keep presenting it over and over and over and over again. And that's the problem that we have in the United States. We keep presenting it over and over and over and over and over again till that copycat tends to pick it up and it becomes a trigger mechanism for them. So with that being said, we need to think about that. So now let me go back to the behavior of the young man. My questions about him would be, what happened in his life that, he wound up with his grandparents? What prompted him not being with his parents? What type of traumas has he had? What type of experiences he had in school from elementary school to high school, because he was a high school student. Was he subject to bullying? Was he a young man that was withdrawn from his peers? Did he have challenges with how to engage in appropriate responses and interactions? Did he connect and have positive, productive relationships with the adults in the school, with the adults in his community or in his family? These are the types of things that we need to take a look at. I would be very interested in knowing what was his school attendance like, what was his behavior like in school, what type of social skills did he have, what was his grades like, was he a student that they had identified as needing support, or was he just a student that was just slipped through this crack because he was functioning in isolation? Although the media said he was lonely, I don't think he was lonely. And I can't say that 100%, but I don't believe he was lonely. I think he probably was operating in isolation, because most young people, they tend to withdraw from their peers and adults and other people in the community. And they tend to just stay to themselves. And sometimes they get engaged in these games, and they become a part of the game. The game become a reality with them. And the one thing we need to understand is that all young folks are impressionable, even when they are engaging in hours and hours and hours of these video games. So we need to look at how this may have impacted him as well. But with that being stated, let's look at what he did. He shot his grandmother and proceeded to the school. He wrecked the truck, shot in the air, and there was an active shooter alert rendered. He was getting individuals out of his way. He was making way to where he wants to be. But the authorities and the school leadership failed to protect the children and the educators in the school, because as an active shooter in any community, schools go down, they go on lockdown, and they remain on lockdown until the active shooter is no more around. He should not have made his way into the building. So the behavior of the authorities was inappropriate. It didn't match their professional duties. They neglected their duties and responsibilities, and it should be dealt with accordingly. And honestly, from a professional standpoint, they don't need to even be in the position that they're in. They need to be terminated. And I don't usually say stuff like that, but their behavior was inexcusable. They acted self-servingly because it was the way that it looked on the media. The police was making sure that their children were out of the building, but while the others were there. So as a police officer, why aren't you engaging in the shooter? You're not supposed to put your life before the life of the community. And as an individual, this young man would not have killed all those police officers, because they all would have been able to address him. They should have got him the moment he sailed that fence. That goes to another set of behavior. Why did the teacher prompt the door open? The teacher prompted the door. I don't know whether it was a she or he, but the teacher prompted the door open 6 minutes before he came into the building. And for some reason, this young man knew to go into that particular door that was prompt open. Now, my question is, what was the teacher thinking? What was the purpose of prompting the door open? Why had not been any announcement about the shoot? I'm certain they heard the shooting. And even when the shooting occurred in the building, you have law enforcement standing outside waiting. They said they were waiting for the SWAT. They had the weapons. They could have just dealt with the young man. I mean, I felt that, his life was expendable, because he took the lives of 19 innocent children and 2 adults. He should not have been able to go from room to room to room. And for the authorities to say, oh, it's no longer an active shooter, it's a barricade situation. I wonder, did this occur because of the behavior, not only the behavior of the the mass shooter, but the behavior of the adults. I believe that the adults are responsible for the deaths of these children, and they are responsible for the death of the two teachers. It's their behavior. I wonder what the social dynamics of their behavior were, and how did it play in what they did not do. Because as we know, when it comes to Black and brown individuals or individuals of color, and keep in mind, this was a Latino community, there tend to be less engagement in terms of support and protection. Had this been any other type of school, would this young man been able to just go into the building like that? I don't think so. So we need to look at those types of behaviors that foster the death of these children and these teachers. We need to look at the behavior of the law enforcement and their mind thinking. Anytime you have a 10-year-old or 11-year-old child say, we have always practiced, we have been practicing lockdown in cases like this, but not one adult follow what they train the children to do. It seems like the children took more of an adult role and adult behavior than the adults did. The children were calling for 911 multiple times. You had children thinking to save themselves. When you have a child that says, I took the blood of my friend and put it on my body and played dead, that child knew that they had to demonstrate a certain form of behavior to survive. So that child behavior was a behavior to escape death, to avoid being killed. But the adults didn't have that interest. And I hate to say that, and that's a bold statement for me to say, but your resource officer was not at the school. He was breaking ball and chain trying to get back to the school. School leadership, they were almost practically absent. I mean, what was going on that this school was left out like this and these children were left vulnerable like this? And so we need to look at that. So we need to really, really pay attention to what we're doing with our public funding. We need to look at how we're managing safety and security of our school. It's my understanding that the school funding had doubled to ensure that there was safety. So where did that money go? That's a question we need to ask. Now, the one thing I will tell you that I can make recommendations on the front end of this, but I will be doing a follow-up video after this once I learn more and more about what has happened and what was going on in the life of the young man that committed the shooting. But I want you to know that, again, this young man went to the elementary school with a weapon and unloaded over 315 rounds of ammunition. Why? What was the function of his behavior? What did the schools fail to do for this young man as he was going from elementary to high school? Because he just didn't all of a sudden have this behavior. What was happening with him academically? What was happening with him socially in school? What was his social skills? Did he have any social skill deficits? Did he have any challenging behaviors? Did he have any academic or attendance issues that needed to be addressed? What type of support was in the home for his grandmother and him? Was he a child of trauma? One of the things that concerns me is that I feel that we have gotten so far into the progressive era that we have lost sight of some of the traditional values and standards that we tend to implement in education as far as being actively involved with our students. And when I say that, when we have students that seem to be withdrawn or isolated, students that tend not to communicate with others or they don't demonstrate certain relationships within the school, the community, or at home, we tend to get involved. We start evaluating the behavior. We provide support to address their needs. And I would like to know if any of this was in place for this young man, or was he just completely ignored and forgotten? So now let's look at the recommendations. Preliminary recommendations that I'm making for the school. When it comes to the students being able to integrate back into the school to be safe, The school needs to develop what you call social emotional learning tasks and structures for student groups, parents, and educators. Social emotional learning and teaching is very important because it will allow for levels of communication, transparency, trust, and support. We need to have what you call social, emotional, focused learning groups where we're doing certain things with our children. We need to have meetings and engagements with our parent because ESSA, Early Student Succeed Act, talks about parental engagement in education. And it's not just about math, science, history, and English. It's about the entire academic genre for children and their learning. We need to open the doors. They need to open the doors to the parents, invite the fathers to be a part of the environment. If the fathers don't do no more than come to the school and they sit there at the bus loop, they're monitoring the hallways, the cafeteria. If the mothers are coming in, if they may be helping in the office, the library, they may give support with activities around the school. They may just be in the school having a parent meeting, just planning something. Have their presence in the building so that our children will feel safe entering into the schools. Because parents are the one thing that makes their children feel safe. Invite them in. Then let's look at the school itself. They need what you call the swipe key entry, where you have to use a key card to enter into the building, meaning that every teacher has a key card that is programmed to his or her employee ID number as well as administrator. That means when the doors close, they automatically lock. And the only way you could get in is to swipe the key, swipe the card, and it would change from red to green and you can come in. So that means if there is an active shooter, the doors are already locked. So it's just a matter of this teachers turning the lights off and moving the children away from a window where they cannot be seen and everyone be quiet, because then the person won't have no means of getting into the classroom. Matter of fact, into the building. And our teachers need not to be prompting doors open. We've been dealing with issues of mass school shootings for a while. We need to have what you call an action plan. The school needs to be placed on an action plan. That means the school administration and leadership need to get together and develop an action plan to present to the Department of Education in Texas. And the Texas Department of Education needs to submit it to the United States Department of Education. And I challenge the United States Department of Education to issue a mandate on active shooting. But there also need to be consequences for failure to properly act. So I want you to know that we need to really think about what it is we're doing. So I've given you some preliminaries on the student, what the protocols were and what should have happened. Let's look at the behavior of your law enforcement, why they felt it was necessary to protect their children, but then allow the others to lose their children and 2 adults to be killed. We need to question their behavior. They were more concerned about life for self versus their duties and responsibilities. We need to also continue to question the behaviors of the school leadership, and most importantly, the behavior of the teacher that prompted the door open, because I'm very interested to know why was that door prompted open, and it was done exactly 6 minutes prior to this young man making his way in the building through the same door. That really bothers me. So I will be doing a follow-up on this, but I'm waiting to see what are some of the facts that come out behind the young man. And I would also be waiting to see what happens with the authorities as well and how they engage. And then I will give you a full-blown professional opinion of their behavior once I receive all the facts. This has been Dr. Crawford with the psychology behind behavior, and I can't wait to follow up with you with part 2 of this segment.